Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Jean-Pierre Garbani, and I am Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, where I focus mostly on performance management, change management, and associated processes and products. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of end-user experience and change management. And to start with, I'm going to present this survey that we've done at Forrester that shows the role, the fundamental role of IT as seen by, a business organization. What we want to do and what we think the role of IT is fundamentally is to improve the end-user workforce productivity. That's really important. That's a mission of IT. And improving the quality of products and processes, which is part of that improvement of end-user workforce productivity. How can we achieve that is a big question. And the key priorities, if we take that mission and we look at IT and ask IT, what is it that you're going to do to achieve these corporate goals? We're going to say, well, we want to improve the measurement of performance and how it impacts the end user, but we want also to improve the development and management of these transactions and applications that we are looking at. So this is setting up the stage, if you wish, for what the IT mission is going to be. The difficulty that we find is in the complexity of today's IT organization and today's IT environment. On this slide, I have mapped, the decreasing cost of IT components. Fundamentally, you see that we started at 100 in 1991. We're now, somewhere around 40. Okay, so an exponential decrease in cost. In the meantime, we have seen an exponential increase in capabilities and speed, memory size, etc. And of course, each time we are bringing that type of improvement, we're taking advantage of it. So you can see that the not parallel, but inversely proportional to the cost of components. The operating system size, for example, in million of source lines of code, okay, is also increasing exponentially, which means that the biggest difficulty that we will find that's facing IT in this mission of improving the end-user productivity is, in fact, the complexity that we are building in the systems that we are using to improve that productivity. What it does is that, in fact, it creates this, autocatalytic process where each technology innovation lowers, as we have seen, the cost-to-value ratio, which means that we can improve the business process, we can improve the business service that IT is bringing. We can make available services that were too expensive in the past. I often use, as an example, what I did 40 years ago and the CPUs and resources that we used 40 years ago. It's not that 40 years ago we couldn't do a number of things that we do today. We could certainly have done, word processing and PowerPoint and Excel and a number of things. It was simply that the system on which we were working at the time cost several $1 million, and nobody would buy or use a word processing at, $3 million. On the other hand, you can buy word processing for $60, and that really making it, pervasive and used by everyone. And that's typically what we're talking about. we are, making more and more capacity and possibilities available to the end user at a price point that is affordable. We are multiplying the demand and consequently the complexity of what we're doing. So on the other end of the scale, the money that we're paying to the vendor and to the technologist results in more innovation that restarts the whole cycle. So we are going through a continuum cycle of IT, improvement, IT capabilities, etc. That makes what we're doing more and more complex, and therefore the task of the IT organization more and more complex. Of course, we have now brought on the market an even more bigger complexity agent, if you wish, which is the concept of virtualization, the concept of the cloud computing that follows virtualization. And this idea that we can orchestrate, that we can move applications, that we can bring more and more resources when they are needed, etc., which by itself brings the idea that we can expand our computing horizon more and more. What it does also is that it brings a lot of more complexity to the equation. That now, you cannot touch the application in a physical server anymore. It's somewhere. It's obscure. It's difficult to perceive what's going on, what's working, what's not working, etc. What are the usage, and what is the resources that are used by that application. So, if we look at this picture, this global picture of IT and IT systems, and the most advanced, system management solution that we put on the market, we get into something that looks like this. We are spending a lot of time trying to understand, where the problem is, what are the problems, who does somewhat something to the network, what is the performance of the disk, what is the performance of the different servers, what is the performance of the code. What we don't look at very often is what happens to the end user. Because fundamentally, we're set to make the end user experience so much better that it will improve the productivity of the workforce. And we are somehow going in, this direction of thinking that improving the performance of the application is going to benefit the end user and make him or her more productive. We are not sure that this is always the case, because as we are increasing all these things, the number of problems by, thousands of lines of code increases proportionally. If I was making, 10 errors in 1,000 lines of code, if I had a 10,000 lines type of software that was 100 errors, if now I have 100,000 lines of code for the same application, well, it means that I have 1,000 problems that I've created. So that makes it more difficult, more complex to diagnose, as we see here that, the number of problems is more and more we have ignored what the end user perceives. And, each time we are creating a faster, better, more complex solution, and we're bringing faster changes, we're bringing things that we perceive in IT as being better for the end user, it may not be a real benefit. As I say here, different isn't better, different is different. We are creating, a customization, we are creating something that we think is adapted to the end user. But my experience shows that when we go through testing and we do a lot of simulation of what this application will do in the field, we're in fact using our perception of the application, our perception of what the end user does during his or her day, not the reality. Which means that, we never look at the change that we have brought to the system or the complexity that we have created as how it impacts the end user. We're just looking at it as how it impacts the system. So these change are highly disruptive. We are looking at, a number of milestones that we're putting in the IT organization to make sure that, effectively, there are tests that tells us, yes, the software is working, yes, we have purged most of the errors, but the structure itself, the way we have sought out what we were doing, is that exactly what your end user was expecting? And that's, a great element of, better understanding or better focusing the IT organization on what is it that the end user is doing. How can we collect that information? How can we understand that impact that we have on workforce productivity? So the big question is, with our focus on performance, can we ignore change? And experience shows that if you're looking at what an end user is doing on his or her desktop, using an application, there are ways that these applications are used, that these business processes are accomplished, that are actually not what the developer or what the production people were thinking about, that people in the field, people who are facing a problem, people who are looking at, a long discussion with the help desk in order to solve their problem, are sometimes, finding their ways around these problems by themselves. It's always been for me an enlightening experience when I am dealing with a person at the airline counter and we're trying to rebook a flight or do things like that. And I don't know if you have had the same experience, but each employee at an airline counter has a little, notebook, where they have handwritten instruction on how to do this, on how to do that. Okay? And sometimes they will ask a colleague, and the colleague will retrieve their notebook and tell them, oh, do this and do that, and it will work. And when you're there, do that. These are the things that we didn't see as developers or as production managers. These are the things that are the end user reality. So, what is the cost? What is the end result of all this? I've had a recent experience with an airline that I'm not going to name, but they changed the kiosk. So when you used to be able to check in and got a receipt for the cost of your ticket, well, now you cannot do that. It's not on the menu. And I called an airline employee who helped me, and we found a way around it to enter friendly ended up being more problem friendly for us in reality. So, you know, in a world where we're spending a lot of money on desktop operation, that's shown here. You know, we're spending today in North America almost 12% of the IT budget to desktop operation. We are not paying a lot of attention, or we are not putting the right tools to understand what's going on at the end user level. And, you know, this is again, end user devices presenting the most important element of, you know, the IT services. We're putting a lot of agents on different things. We're putting agents on servers, on databases, on the network, we are measuring end user experience by looking at response time. We're not looking at what's happening in that desktop, which is, you know, almost 1/3 of, you know, the hardware budget of the enterprise. So, what would be a better approach? Well, of course, if we're looking at pure performance, we're going to say, oh, well, you know, application performance solution, there's a lot of appliances. You can plug it in on the network, it will give you response time, etc. That is a data center-centric view of the world. That's, you know, making sure that my server and my application and all the stuff that is in my data center are actually working within specs. It doesn't tell me, you know, what's happening at the end user level. And that particular impact of how the end user is using the business process and the business service, how the end user is reacting to the interface, and what are the real problems that they are facing on their day-to-day operation, that cannot be told by an appliance or by a monitoring solution. It has to be told by something, an agent that will capture whatever is happening at the end user level. So if we put an agent on the end user device, we all of a sudden understand, you know, what they are doing, what is it, how are they going through a business process, how the changes that we have made to that application or to that transaction, to that interface, how is that impacting the end user? Are they spending more time now scratching their head trying to find, you know, like I did with my airline employee, a way to get the receipt? Because it's not there. It used to be a button here, and the button has disappeared. Well, how do I do that? And should I refer to my little notebook and all that kind of stuff? So the impact of change can only be understood if you put something that is close to the end user and collects data that can represent by itself the end user. So, as a conclusion, I would say that what we see in general as application is strongly influenced by the end user device. And it requires, you know, in an enterprise, if we want to be, you know, faithful to our mission of improving workforce productivity, we need to have a desktop-centric approach. We need to look at what's happening at the end user endpoint. And that is going to be more and more significant as we build more and more complex applications that are using more and more local, you know, desktop-based Java applets and different pictures and services coming from, you know, different horizons. So if we understand better how this application, this precise application, is used and what is the impact of the changes that we have made to that application, we're going to certainly benefit by preventing, you know, a certain number of issues, a number of calls, a number of things that the end user are going to require from the service desk, from different groups in IT. we can certainly better understand what we're facing. What is real? What is the user reality? What is the workload? How is it made? What is it made of? Are going to be extremely important in terms of how do I configure a system? How do I size the capacities that I need for a given application? So, we are going to certainly get through a lot of savings because fundamentally we're spending a lot of time and a lot of resources supporting the client, supporting the end user. And if we can do a better job, if we can have a better perception of what the end user is doing, we certainly can envision a lot of saving in that area. And we have got to understand fundamentally that application performance, response time, which is important. There is no question that poor response time is going to spoil an application. But it's not the end of the world. It's not the only thing that is important. And we have got to understand that performance and business process performance are two different things, or two things that are, well, probably related, okay, glued at the hip, but requires